and I had reached to the point where we were talking about sewage management. And Mr. Speaker, I don't think that I have to explain in any great detail the importance of the discharge and or disposal of sewage into the maritime environment. We simply cannot do so because one, we run the risk, as I indicated, that we could potentially have major issues associated with pollutants in the marine environment, damage to marine life. We also have, Mr. Speaker, the issue as it relates to Barbados' perception and how environmental groups would view Barbados if we were to allow this behavior to happen. And therefore, the Act is very clear, Clause 209, where it says that operators of vessels must comply with sewage management. And it goes on to talk about they must have a sewage plan, and they must, of course, avoid anything that could have long-term consequences for our marine environment. Of course, the bill is also very clear as it relates to chemical waste, and it makes the point that no person shall discharge chemical waste into the marine environment. It talks about the responsibilities of the vessel or the boat master, operator of the member of the crew in relation to such. The other issue, of course, is vessel refueling, and that's at section clause 211, where it talks about when the vessel is being refueled, that a person shall cease any fuel flows where there is an indication of a spillage or of overflow. Of course, if there's a spillage, Mr. Speaker, and it goes undetected, it could, of course, ruin our marine resources. And it goes on at sea to speak about the fact that you have to fill all portable tanks ashore before placing them on the vessel. Again, another protection mechanism for any fuel overflow. It also speaks to vessel emissions at clause 212. It talks about the fact that every person shall make an effort to prevent, reduce, and control emissions from the vessel. It also speaks to 213 about vessel noise management. And even though it might sound, Mr. Speaker, very simple in respect to say about why you're instituting a vessel noise management within a bill, of course, if you are in the sea, the waters, and you have vessels that are obviously at a decibel level, headed to not withstanding the air, you can imagine the discomfort that you could have with persons who are, of course, using our waters. But what is clear, Mr. Speaker, that the penalties and enforcement, those are contained at clause 214, and it basically says a person who contravenes sections 203, 205, 206, 207, 208, 209, 210, 211, 212, and 213 is guilty of an offense and liable on summary conviction to a fine of 100,000 or to imprisonment for 7 years. I mean, Mr. Speaker, the fine, some people might say, well, that's a lot of money. But if you can imagine, if we do not have these protections in place and our marine environment becomes so polluted that we are unable to recover, of course, 100,000 wouldn't be enough maybe to pay for a cleanup and to protect Barbados's name abroad. So even though it may come across as though the fine is significant, the fine is not significant in relation to the economic fallout that any polluter could cause us, be it a fuel spill, be it a sewage spill in the ocean, within our borders, that obviously will be more damning to us. And therefore, we have to ensure we put the appropriate mechanisms in place to sustain our marine environment. At part 11, the bill also goes into great detail in respect of marine salvage and wrecks. The bill clauses 214 right through until 232 addresses the marine salvage and wreck in general, particularly the protection of the marine environment from vessel wrecks and the environmental impact that wrecks can cause the devastating consequences to our marine environment, of course, negatively impacting people who work within this sector. Various toxic substances may leak from a vessel during a wreck, and obviously that's consequential to the marine or to a maritime accident. And therefore, we have to ensure we protect. The bill sets so the framework. It talks about the duty of a receiver at 218. It speaks to the passage over adjoining lands. It also speaks to the power of the receiver to be appointed. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, there's a common law principle, I'm told, and the general principle is that no cure, no pay, meaning that if a salvor expanded his or her time, effort, and resources to salvage a shipwreck and was only partially successful, he cannot claim compensation. The International Maritime Organization obviously is seeking to incentivize those persons to sustain the salvage industry, and they did so via the 1989 International Salvage Convention, of which Barbados is a party to. And as a result, he had to develop a fair regime for this sector so that persons could be compensated for the work in respect of wrecks. The Marine Salvage and Wrecks regime in the Domestic Shipping Vessels Bill also follows, Mr. Speaker, the IMO requirements that we are to ensure, and it sets so at clause 236. It sets out very clearly the criteria for salvage rewards. So that's all clearly documented. It talks about the salvage value of the vessel and other property. It talks about the skill and the effort, the salvers in respect to preventing and maintaining, minimizing, damage to the environment. It talks about the danger, the nature of danger, and so on. I'm not going to go into all of that detail, Mr. Speaker, because it's all very clear in the bill. If we go to part 12, and at part 12, it speaks again. The bill is very comprehensive in its approach as it relates to abandoned, derelict, and stray vessels. Of course, we are very clear that no person shall abandon, store, or leave in a derelict condition a vessel on land, coast, or at sea. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the regime under this bill will provide for the management of abandoned, derelict, and stray vessels. And as such vessels, of course, Mr. Speaker, will pose a significant threat not only to public health, but also a threat to the lives of the environment, and of course the resultant threat to the ocean space. As vessels become abandoned and derelict for many reasons, the owners oftentimes may neglect or abandon the vessel when they can no longer afford to maintain them. Some vessels break loose from anchor or moorings and drift away, and some may be stolen. And of course, when we have severe weather events like a hurricane, or sometimes you have flooding, strain away could of course happen. And in cases where we have hurricane or type events in our country, vessels of course can sink at moorings or become submerged in tidal areas or become stranded on shorelines, of course, or on reefs. So the bill also makes it very clear that abandoned, derelict, or stray vessels can cause problems for marine, and therefore, by blocking navigational channels, damaging the ecosystem, and of course, like I said earlier, some vessels may contain fuel or other hazardous material, and leaks obviously could cause significant problems. So the Shipping Domestics Vessel Bill outlines the regime for the removal of the safe removal and safe disposal of abandoned, derelict, and of course, stray vessels. It's all set out. The removal at clause 251 in respect of abandoned vessel. At clause 254, it speaks to the removal and disposal of a derelict vessel. and of course, vessel breaking. Of course, vessel breaking involves leading the vessel to shore if it is in water, assessing the contents, locating, isolating fuel tanks and oils and so on. So that's all is all covered within this particular section, section 12 of the bill. If you go to section 13, in respect of clauses 260 to 279, where it speaks to marine facilities, the interpretation section of this bill defines marine facility as a vessel building, maintenance, repair, recycling facility, a vessel haul-out facility, a marina, a vessel docking facility, a vessel storage facility, or any other facility in relation to a small vessel. Of course, it is clearly defined within the bill. It talks about the marine facilities survey, that no person shall put into operation or continue in operation a marine facility without a marine facility survey. And it speaks to the survey report. And of course, a marine facility must also be certified. And of course, the surveyor is the one who would have to certify the marine facility, and that's all taken into account at section 265 of the bill. It also speaks to unfit marine. It also speaks to unfit marine facility at clause 270, and obviously it carries with it environmental planning and the like. So, Mr. Speaker, it's quite exhaustive there. I don't want to go through every component as it relates to that part of the bill. Suffice to say that once the certificate is issued by a surveyor, subject to carrying out of the marine facility survey by the surveyor in respect to the facility, then all should be in order. Mr. Speaker, the suite of laws presented will also, as I indicated earlier, provide safety environmental guidelines that span the entire coastal and marine space and regulates the safety and environmental conditions in respect of small vessels, craft, small craft, sports craft, and the like. But one of the things I might wish to make the point while we are at this junction is to speak to the whole issue of the corporate social responsibility efforts being conducted by the port, the Barbados port. In relation to our marine facilities, specifically the haul-up facilities, the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport wishes to make the point that the Barbados Port Inc. has physical and operational responsibility for the moorings in Carlisle Bay, for Spikestown, and for Prospect on the West Coast, in addition to the berthing facilities in the Corinage and the Shallow Draft. Might also add, excuse me, that the key initiatives undertaken, just to bring the House up to date with respect to what's happening, the Shallow Draft Marina, the Barbados Port Inc. is upgrading the marina. They've provided for additional 70 stern to berths there. The project, of course, included the wave attenuation structures to reduce wave energy during extreme wave events. Obviously, a fuel dock is there to ensure that we refuel, as well as the fish and farmers market for the Fisher Fort community in that area. And obviously, the entire project cost for the Shallow Draft Marina is anticipated to be about $40 million. The boat haul-out facility, and this, of course, Mr. Speaker, is an area that we have to focus on. It is going to be located on the Mighty Griner Highway. Of course, it will offer marine maintenance and repair services to Barbados. Of course, we're going to expand our reach to ensure we can do it regionally, as well as on the international scene for the boating community. The project was tendered as a concession. It was awarded to a contractor. The planning application has been submitted, and it's currently being evaluated by the relevant agencies. And as soon as that is completed, of course, the Barbados Port will have the facility operated under a regime where boat owners will benefit from tax concessions on selected parts and equipment. There is a temporary boat lift-out facility. That is the lift-out facility when you're on Princess Silas going down to that highway, part of the highway. You will see boat storage on the site adjacent to the Baiko on Prescott Boulevard, that's the name of it, Prescott Boulevard. The facility provides a space for the repair and for the maintenance of vessels, and as we pass that area, you can see what is happening there. It's outfitted with the necessary electrical and water utilities, and the area is being used predominantly by fishing vessels, but has adequate space for residential and commercial boating community. The lift-out service at the shallow draft, there was an issue in that area with respect to the power lines overhead, and therefore those have been relocated underground, so we no longer have that threat as you go through the entrance of the shallow draft. The port is presently awaiting a similar removal by other providers to participate in the movement of vessels with a high mast from the shallow draft lift-out to the temporary boat facility. The port advised me that they will spend approximately $1 million in this respect, and everything should have been installed at this point in time. But the reality is that they're replacing equipment that was over 40 years old. In respect to the corporate social responsibility again, the port is also giving significant corporate level support to the fishing center. The honorable member for St. James North will be particularly happy as he traverses his constituency to see the wonderful works being executed at the Millie Eiffel Fish Market in St. James. Of course, the works were conducted following consultations with the community. We also had to ensure that the existing fish market was dismantled and a temporary facility was erected. But what you're beginning to see now, as it draws close, is that you're going to have a wonderful facility with all the aesthetics that you would not even imagine could be associated with the fish market. And like I said, the honorable member for St. James North will be absolutely delighted in the facility. I'm told it should cost us approximately $2.7 million, and I've been further assured by the port that construction is on time and there are no cost overruns. The projected cost there is $2.7 million. In respect of the Corinage developments, you know that with respect to the Corinage Bay area, there is an investment going on by Daisy Investments that obviously would have caused some boats and boat owners who were tenants in that general area to be dislocated. What the Barbados Port did, and much to the credit, was to ensure that we still maintain the appropriate facilities for boats and boat owners. And therefore, in the inner Corinage for the monohull vessels, work was done there to the tune of $45,000. In the outer Corinage area for the catamarans, of course, that was a cost of $1.5 million. And the party vessel dock just off the Bridgetown Fisheries area, that was done at a cost of $840,000. I believe not so long, I believe it was this week, if I'm not mistaken, that there were some pictures in a local newspaper which obviously sought to indicate the works that we're doing. Of course, at the appropriate time, the port will do what they have to do with respect to further announcements. So I just thought that I would mention a lot of the work associated with the Barbados Port Inc. And of course, as part of this social corporate responsibility campaign. Of course, we are well aware that there is a fire station within the port that the port also constructed at their cost. And of course, not only for the port, but also to ensure that within a defined radius, that fire station can also help communities within the radius of Bridgetown, as so defined by the fire department. So, Mr. Speaker, I said all of that to say that work is ongoing. We have a lot more work to do in respect of the Bridgetown port, but we are grateful for all that they continue to do in respect of their social corporate responsibility in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, in respect of enforcement, at clause 14 of the bill, from sections 280 to 293, sets out the enforcement regime. It talks about the marine safety regulator and marine safety officers who will partner, of course, with law enforcement agencies. That is the Marine Unit of the Police Service, and of course the Barbados Coast Guard to ensure compliance. And those things are documented from clauses at 285 all the way to 293. Mr. Speaker, I also think it's necessary that we look at some of the issues associated with the bill as it relates to marine environmental breaches. Of course, these will include, if you look at Clause 286, a marine environmental breach ticket. It talks about if you anchor a vessel in an area designated as a marine managed area, in a marine protected area, in a marine park, a marine reserve, or other designated area. It talks about anchoring a vessel on a coral reef. It talks about committing any prohibited acts in a designated area contrary to this act, this bill, when it becomes an act, and the statutory instruments made thereunder, or any other enactments related to the management and protection and preservation of the designated marine areas. It talks about the littering and or the discharge of waste into the marine environment, the feeding of turtles, very important, sir, the feeding of turtles and other marine life with unhealthy and non-nutritious foods. It also talks about engaging in environmentally harmful practices which may cause damage to the marine, and operating a vessel or engaging in any act in a matter that causes harm or damage to the marine environment. The offenses are set out. Obviously, the offenses warranting the imposition of a higher penalty as specified throughout the bill. Of course, assessment of legislative breaches and imposition of appropriate penalties are a matter for the courts, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Part 15 of the bill, which speaks to the miscellaneous provisions, some highlights of this particular part of the bill included the Small Vessels Industry Support Fund, and I might wish to just briefly make the point that there at Clause 298, there shall be a Small Vessel Industry Support Fund to serve as a repository for any monies voted for by Parliament for the fund, fees, voluntary subscriptions, donations, or any other sources. Of course, there is a sustainable economic development initiatives contained in the bill, Clause 300, where it speaks to a regime focusing and strengthening the voice of the industry to secure inputs and continued contributions to the small vessel sector, of course, to the water sports community. And by virtue of Clause 300, a person or group representing small vessel industry may formulate and submit a written proposal to the administration for its consideration of a sustainable economic development strategy or initiative. The ministry, as the regulator of this industry, and the community cannot think of everything, hence the proposed strategies or initiatives for the continued benefit of the industry as a community is recognized, obviously, and will be welcomed. Mr. Speaker, Clause 302, and I want to alert the House that we are going to delete at 302 subsection 2C. We are going to delete that clause. Lead the opposition just for your benefit as well, and that we are going to be deleting that clause when we go to committee. But Mr. Speaker, also climate change and disaster mitigation is contained at Clause 303. As you're well aware, Barbados has been championing a lot of initiatives that are necessary for climate change. Obviously, we are faced with a climate crisis, and in every respect, we have to do whatever we can do to mitigate disaster planning. We rely predominantly and very heavily on coastal areas of Barbados for our future economic activity, and therefore not only for tourism, but not only for the livelihoods and the economic viability of persons working within that sector. But if you take a broader brush, the social economic impact that could cause across Barbados would be tremendous, and therefore consistent with what we've been talking about locally, regionally, and internationally. We have to ensure that climate change and disaster management mitigation remain in the forefront, and that we have an adoption plan necessary to ensure the survival of this particular sector. And that is why I spent as much time as was necessary to ensure. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to go through clauses all the way down to 3 or 4. I would also wish to alert the Honourable House as well that clause 310 will be amended, and we will facilitate that amendment when we're in committee. But Mr. Speaker, I think it's safe to say that all the work that we've done in respect of the shipping domestic suite of laws creates that enabling environment and conditions for achieving and maintaining what I consider to be a very safe and happy space for small vessels in the industry. Of course, the water sports community stakeholders, we have to continue to sustain the employment and livelihoods of persons within that sector. And as we continue our economic diversification, Mr. Speaker, industry stakeholders will obviously continue to enhance their earning capacity, not only through the conventional small vessels and water sports activities and the like, but also through becoming, for example, Mr. Speaker, a marine driving instructor. As when I was going through the bill at clause 157, I made that point. Becoming a marine training instructor, establishing private marine training schools or institutions. Talking about, for example, you can conducting night water taxis, which is made provision for in clause 285 of the bill. And that night taxi services regime further elaborated in the small vessels regulations to the bill that will come. Getting, for example, persons involved in careers as a boat technician, getting persons involved as boat manufacturer, getting persons involved in boating repairs and of course, building, and generally creating opportunities for persons as we settle in clauses 300. The domestic vessel suite of laws will also deliver numerous benefits for Barbados, Mr. Speaker. There is a delicate balance between the need to properly regulate in terms of maritime safety and maritime environmental protection at the same time, and supporting economic development activities surrounding the entire sector and industry. And therefore, the legislative framework that we seek to capitalize on the value of these small vessels and related activities, recognizing the importance to sustaining, like I said, the livelihoods, the supporting households, and the overall contribution to the Barbados' tourism product. The shipping domestic laws is not only about correcting the legislative related deficiencies identified by the IMO in the 2018 audit, not having the adequate framework for domestic voyages, but it's also about bringing along underserved sector of people to an industry to the forefront. And we are going to continue to create opportunities within this sector. We are going to ensure that we protect and preserve our maritime environment. We are going to ensure that we have the safe operation of vessels in respect of the marine environment. And we are going to, of course, ensure that the soon-to-be-named Barbados Maritime Transport Administration will be implemented over a period of some 18 months, obviously with the compliance grace period as settled the clause necessary to the clause consequent to the bill. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of work to be done, but we are happy with our engagement with the stakeholders and all that they have done. Mr. Speaker, before I conclude, I think it may be at the appropriate time to speak a little bit about the regime for the protection of ships against piracy and terrorism attacks in the maritime sector. Although this does not feature within this particular framework, because we have very shortly come into Parliament the Marine Shipping Suite of Laws, the Merchant Shipping, thanks, I remember, Merchant Shipping Suite of Laws. The Shipping Domestic Bill, Vessels Bill, while it promotes maritime safety and security is specific to the small vessels, as I indicated, operating locally within the Caribbean area. But the piracy regime for larger merchant ships engaged in international voyages and transiting what we call the high risk areas is addressed under the Merchant Shipping Act and not the shipping domestic vessels legislation. But it's important to let the House know that in keeping with the IMO security standards that of course that they publish, that we are revamping other areas. We've had not so long ago attacks on Barbados registered vessels. Those were isolated and dealt with. No harm to Barbados' reputation, but the fact that we have updated legislation coming will obviously put us in good stead. So I thought I'll make that point, albeit not at this point specific to the bill at hand. The other factor that I wish the House to consider is that we have several pieces of legislation to come. Currently, the ministry, of course, the port, and of course the drafters within the Office of the Attorney General, they are working assiduously on ensuring that we bring that additional pieces of legislation to this honorable chamber. And we have to do it because as we build up Barbados' economic base, we have to look to update and modernize our laws as we build out this important sector. I could, for example, Mr. Speaker, talk about the fact that we want, as we've built out tourism, we want to build out shipping and logistics and create that new corridor of economic growth and development for the country. And therefore, if we do that, we will have position ourselves in a better place to exploit all of the economic opportunities that exist based on our very strategic geographic location. Of course, I will speak to that at the appropriate time when we bring the additional suite of legislation to this honorable chamber. But the chamber must also recall that it was on February 12th of this year when the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Act, the FAL Act, was enacted, and therefore that act was part of the changing pieces of legislation that we brought to this honorable place to ensure that we look at improving our efficiency, that we look to improve our standards as we seek to reduce congestion in our port, as we ensure that we don't have high emissions as a result of ships being in port idle, waiting for all the paperwork to be completed. That is going at a very good pace, and I want to say that I'm very happy that we are in this place together. Mr. Speaker, as I started out by indicated that this bill, obviously, and matters relating to maritime is always of a very highly technical nature. I'm not an expert, don't pretend to be. Of course, in matters relating to maritime, I have to take the advice of the officers, some of whom have graced us with their presence in this honorable chamber. But I really want to say to the officers, to the Barbados Port Inc., and to those who would have helped us within the CPC and Office of the Attorney General to get this bill here, a warm thank you. It is important that we recognize those officers who worked tirelessly to help us modernize our legislation. And as I indicated, the Shipping Act of 1994, and since 1994, things have changed at such a great pace. We could not have continued on that path. And I'm therefore grateful to all of those who helped us in this particular bill. I also want, Mr. Speaker, and I did seek your permission before, to recognize the presence of the officers who are here with us. I would want to start by acknowledging and saying thanks to the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Charlie Brown, who's also been working overtime on off days, on days, and everything else to ensure that we get to this place, amongst other matters that he's working on. I wish to express our thanks to him. I also wish to say a thank you to the Chief Technical Officer, Ms. Jacqueline Blackman, for all the work that she's done. In fact, it could not have been a greater gift, Mr. Speaker, to ask her to come to this honorable chamber, because as I have been told, that from of today's date, that is June the 7th, Ms. Blackman will be going on pre-retirement leave. So if I were in a position to rename the bill, perhaps we could call it the Blackman Bill. But I can't do so because the rules of the House will not permit me to do so. But I want to say to Ms. Jacqueline Blackman, our Chief Technical Officer, thank you for all the work that you've done in the ministry. She's done outstanding work. Mr. Speaker, when I tell you she's done outstanding work, she's been a tower of strength and a body of institutional knowledge. And I want to say, as you leave today on your pre-retirement leave, that the ministry shall not forget you, but that you may have additional work to do for us as we continue to expand the work within the ministry. So thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of a young lady who would have worked very closely with her, who's here, and obviously transfer of knowledge is important. Ms. Dion Gibbs, who's with us as well, who's contributed in no small measure to the bill. Let me also thank the officers at the port. I would like to recognize Captain Carol Branch, who's with us. Obviously, I would like to recognize Romel Edwards, Ian Stewart as well, and I believe Mr. John Murray was here earlier, the Chief Executive Officer of the port. So, Mr. Speaker, I've had a long run. I believe I have been somewhat comprehensive in the delivery of the bill in respect of the shipping domestic vessels and the suite of legislation. And as I indicated, it is perhaps always an honor when you can stand in this honorable place and do the work on behalf of a country and certainly on behalf of a grateful nation. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time, and I'm much obliged. Thank you.
Honourable Member Christchurch.
I'm grateful for the applause, sir. Mr. Speaker, as a democracy matures, one finds that debate becomes less partisan and more philosophical. And as it becomes more philosophical, there's individual adherence to policy. And I seize this opportunity to say at the outset that this is one of those occasions when, in a maturing democracy, legislation of this nature permits all members to adhere to the legislation as a matter of policy and as a matter of good policy. And I therefore congratulate the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central for bringing the legislation and indeed for his manner of delivery. So gracious was he to acknowledge those who no doubt contributed to the drafting of this legislation. It is a rare occurrence. I have not seen it very often in this place when a minister is so gracious as to acknowledge those who work behind the scenes to ensure that legislation comes to this place and that it can fairly be said that it is legislation well rooted in the experience of persons who work within the area of concern. And it seems to me that today this is an occasion on which legislation is well rooted among those who work in the area. This seems to be an occasion in which a democracy marks its maturation when a minister comes here and delivers himself as this minister has done today. And I congratulate the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central. And he is given to that kind of mature conduct when he is here debating generally. I say the legislation is non-controversial, and there's nothing, even in opposition, acknowledging that legislation is non-controversial. And it seeks, as I understand it, to establish a legal regime that regulates human conduct within the maritime environment. Now, I'll be very brief, sir. And I share this anecdote with you. When we were children going to the Paradise Beach, this is in the 70s, there was a water sports facility there called Willie's Water Sports. And right in front of the Paradise Hotel, there was an area protected by, there was a barricade that stretched into the sea. It was a rectangular barrier. Now, some of us used to assume that that barrier was there for the protection of swimmers and bathers against the speedboats. In those early days, they did not have the modern jet ski. And speedboats were known to be fairly dangerous. They would go at high speed up and down the coastline. And some of us assumed that that barrier was placed in the water so that the boat could not threaten swimmers and bathers. But it was right in front of the hotels, and others of us assumed that that barrier was placed in the water to keep the locals from using the area in front of the hotel. So some of us left there believing that that barrier served a dual purpose. It was to keep the locals out of that area directly in front of the hotel. And on the other hand, it may have been placed there to protect bathers and swimmers from the speedboats which sailed up and down at high speed. Now, you, sir, are young enough to recall the England tour to the West Indies in 1966. Fred Titmus. These young people don't know what is going on. He was the vice captain of the England team, and he lost some toes in a boating accident. He was hanging on to the side of the boat, not being aware that the propellers were underneath the boat. So as he attempted to climb into the boat, his foot got caught. He was England's vice captain. I know you remember that. You're a good Spartan man like me. And his toes got caught, and he lost some of his toes. His cricket career resumed, though. But interestingly enough, that boat was driven by the captain's wife. Colin Cowdrey was the captain on that tour. You remember that, sir. And it was not purposeful. It was an accident. And that illustrates the danger that the marine environment can present to people, because we went to that beach and these boats used to be up and down at high speed. And if you were a good swimmer, I don't know if you were a good swimmer, sir, but the good swimmers went out far. And if you went out far into the sea, you were at, the boats became a hazard to you, because a boat coming down at high speed and the driver of that boat is looking back at his skier and he's not looking at you. So that the good swimmers had to be in the water wondering if they were going to be killed by this boat. But that highlights the need for regulation of the maritime environment, the marine environment. We know that on land, vehicles, cars, are regulated by the traffic laws. But the point I make, sir, is that in the sea, there seemed to be no regulation of that marine environment. You are at the risk, you are at the mercy of a high-speed boat going up and down. And as I said, the driver of the boat used to be looking back at the skier, and you were there praying that he doesn't run you over. It got worse when the jet skis came, because again, the jet ski was rented out to amateur drivers, and sometimes they were children. I noticed that this legislation speaks to the vehicles not being driven by persons under 16, but through you, sir, Minister, I have seen persons under 16 driving jet skis. So I don't know what the legislation will say in relation to them. I don't know what your safety officers will say to them. I don't imagine that a safety officer will go down on the beach and ask a little 14-year-old boy how old he is. But the sea can become, in terms of leisure, the sea becomes a very hazardous environment. In my day, certainly, it was a chaotic environment. It seemed that there were no laws protecting the sea bather, and he or she tended to be at the mercy of these high-speed vehicles. So I'm happy that there is now legislation dealing particularly with small leisure craft, and that people can go to the beach now and feel that there is some measure of protection. Although I suspect, through you, Mr. Speaker, I suspect, Minister, that there will still be some difficulty because the roadway is pretty much well defined, and the police officer knows, we all have an idea as to a very definite roadway, but the sea is an environment which is expansive, and policing will become a very difficult area to supervise. How do you supervise it? Will the safety officers have a small boat? Will they stand on the beach? Will they work with the BDF? I would urge the Port Authority and the authority to deal or relate to these practical aspects of policing for the sake of safety. But I commend the legislation. I support the legislation. I was listening before I got here because I was very interested in the legislation, and I heard Mr. Speaker, the Minister, say that it is not intended for fishing vessels, so that I take it, and fishing vessels tend not to be hazardous. They're on a fairly specific mission. It is the pleasure craft that present a danger to people who go to the beach for leisure. So that I encourage you, Minister, through you, sir, to develop, as you have developed very voluminous legislation, and that is commendable, that the journey is not finished when we leave this place. That the journey has to continue in terms of practical management, practical policing of that environment. And I reminded His Honor, the Speaker, of the 1968 accident involving Fred Titmus, so that the hazard goes as far back as 1968. And he was a visitor to this country of some distinction, which would indicate to you that all of us, from the most distinguished visitors to the most humble little boy on the beach, we are all at risk when it comes to the marine environment. So that I hope that the authority, the Maritime Authority, will attend to the matter of beach safety with some care. It starts early on mornings. I can say to you, my beach used to be Paradise Beach, if there's to be any personal anecdote, and that used to be a very, very hazardous place. Since the hotel has moved, it looks like what you felt it looked like when the Aboriginals were here. It has become the most beautiful beach in Barbados, which would tell you that human habitation or the location of hotels tend to spoil beaches. And that beach has now returned to its pristine beauty, but I know it when it was a place of very active water sports. There was always the scent of the suntan lotion. The member for St. Michael South may want to write a poem on that when you went to the beach in those days, there was the ever-present smell of suntan lotion and ski boats, and it was an activity that became very hazardous. Today, that Paradise Beach, if you go there, it is a completely different place. But that is the exception. Stretching from the Hilton right down to St. Peter has become a fairly hazardous zone. And I know that the authority knows this, that is the area of prime activity. And I say that to say that's miles and miles of course, and it will be very difficult to police that. And much resources will have to be dedicated to the matter of beach safety and maritime safety and coastal safety. And so I urge the authorities not to see it as any peripheral activity. I know the minister said earlier that there used to be this saying that the beach has no back door or something like that. Yes, that's what our parents used to say to keep us out of the sea. But on any bank holiday now, you will find a lot of Barbadians at the beach. And they have reversed what their parents told them, and they have now embraced the sea as an area of recreation. And therefore, the work of the authority becomes even more critical, and I would want to urge the authority to dedicate much of its resources towards policing. If it takes a few small boats, so be it. Do not see it as an expense that is luxurious. The safety of people in the sea, along the coastline, is very important. The fact that we don't have accidents every day does not mean that we should not dedicate resources to it. We really should dedicate resources to it, because the coastline is a fairly hazardous environment, and being so hazardous, I want to commend the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central for leaving the land and going off land into the coastline and passing such voluminous legislation, not only for the regulation of maritime vehicles, but for the safety of the citizens of this country. So I support and commend the legislation to this House, Your Honor, and I hope that the regulations which follow, the Minister has promised. Again, I am impressed that the regulations will be as voluminous. I listened very carefully, that the regulations will be as voluminous as the Minister promises, because it is one thing to have legislation, but the regulations pertain to the day-to-day management and the legality of the management of what the legislation covers. So all in all, we are very happy that this legislation has come. The minister did say earlier on, I listened carefully. Before I got here, I was in my car listening, that this is specific legislation that separates itself from large maritime vehicles, vessels, same thing. And again, we are happy that we now have legislation that targets a specific size of vehicle. I think I heard the figure 24 meters, 20-something meters. I think that is what I heard. So I'm happy. And this country should be happy that the government is making provision for the safety of its citizens when they are at leisure on bank holidays and indeed every day of the week. So with those few words, Your Honor, that is the extent of my contribution. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I too would like to begin by commending the Minister on this piece of legislation. It is a pleasure to see it brought before the House. And like the Minister, I also want to thank the staff in the ministry, my former staff, who I know to be an excellent staff. I think inadvertently the Minister, permit me to say, sir, Miss Najla King, who I know how you feel about Najla, so I believe that was a slip. Miss Najla King, who would have done a lot of this work in association with Miss Blackman and the team there, and the outstanding team at the Bridgetown Ports. So I wish to begin by commending them. I had the pleasure to work with them for the first 3.5 years of my life as a minister. So it is a pleasure to see this legislation being brought to this House, sir, but I would want to begin by thanking the Prime Minister, really, in her wisdom, having created a Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy to focus primarily on issues pertaining to the ocean. Sir, it was clear when we came into office, the Minister spoke of the audit that was done in 2018, sir. And that audit revealed a number of very scary things for Barbados. In fact, sir, the audit would suggest that Barbados had a very underdeveloped or undeveloped maritime infrastructure, sir, in relation to its legislation, its physical infrastructure, its institutions, its personnel, and so on, sir. And I think the PM in her wisdom was suggesting that we needed to get it right, at least lay the groundwork to begin to rebuild that sector, sir. And the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central is doing a brilliant job, sir, in bringing these things to this place and bringing Barbados into the modern era. Thank you. Sir, during that audit, sir, and the quote is that it was observed that there was no legislation or policy developed for the implementation and enforcement of the requirements stemming from the IMO instruments, which would be applicable to vessels on domestic voyages, sir. It said that there was no legislation or policy developed. In other words, sir, we made all these commitments and we put nothing in place to make sure that we could bring true the truest manifestation of the promises that we made. And this bill, like the file bill that the minister brought earlier, like the merchant suite of legislation that the minister will bring, in relation to the emissions, I know at some point that we have to bring, the fisheries management and legislation that we also have to bring, sir. All these things, a whole range of them, sir, to make us a more relevant country in relation to the International Maritime Organization and our own focus on the maritime space. So I hold the view very strongly that this bill, while the minister said it is a technical bill, and I agree, it is a very technical bill. Maritime is a very technical space. Those who sacrifice all of their years and put their life into this work, like Ms. Blackman and so on, sir, would know that this is a very technical space, sir. I had the privilege of being taught by the best for the few years that I was in the ministry. It is a very technical space. But if we don't get these technical things right, and I'm very pleased that the minister went through it in such detail, because if we do not get these technical things right, we will not reap the benefit of the real things, the practical things. And this is a technical bill, sir, but it has very practical implications, sir. And I believe, sir, that we have now to redesign our overall architecture. We have to make sure, sir, that the architecture reflects that which we wish for Barbados, sir, so that Barbados can become a serious space for maritime, both at the domestic level and at the international level. For ships over 150 gross tons at the merchant level and under 150 gross tons at the domestic level. It is very, 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 very important, sir. We stand, sir, to put ourselves in a position where we can reap significant economic benefit. Significant economic benefit, sir, if we get this right. The reality is that when I took up the position, sir, as minister, many things came to me. We discussed, in relation to the international level, sir, we discussed the ship registry, which will be in the merchant suite. We discussed the ship registry and how do we make that more profitable? How do we put Barbados as a brand, sir? I felt very strongly that Barbados should have a position on the International Maritime Organization and that we should be in a position, sir, of putting our footprint and our viewpoint to the world and influencing the world. But it became very difficult so to do when our own architecture was too weak. We could not command the space because our legislation was not strong enough and our personnel, sir, was not big enough and large enough, sir, to be taken as a serious space. And so while we felt that we wanted to expand the ship registry, it became very clear to me that the issues there were in relation to legislation. So that if we got the legislation right, then it would allow us to be in a position, sir, to generate revenue. If there's one thing that I know about the shipping space, sir, is that ships and persons in that space are like certainty. And this legislation, sir, gives us certainty, it gives us clarity in relation to who is responsible for what, when is what supposed to be delivered, who is supposed to deliver it, those things, sir. If there are cases to be heard, sir, the seafarers legislation that is coming, sir, that will protect Barbadian seafarers, sir, also give that level of certainty. There is a lot of work, sir, that is done in this space, sir. I commend the officers, sir. And I look forward to all of these bills being debated. Technical or not, sir, this is what is going to make a significant difference for Barbados. You know, when we were young, sir, the constituency that I represent in St. Michael South, the Bayland, was known for seamen. Like, there were seamen all over Barbados, but the Bayland was a place, sir, if you were, all these, there was a place known for many men who worked the sea. Seafarers. No, back in the day, we didn't say no seafarers. Say he was a seaman. I take the language of the leader of the opposition and say in a mature discussion with mature personnel, sir, men who were at the sea that were back then called seamen. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, but those days are gone. You know, you used to leave the Bayland and just walk down to the Carina, just walk into town. Somebody may say, you know, the vessel's hiring. And there and then, sir, you just got a pothole. If you don't have it on, you get an ID. And before you know it, you're on a ship. You're a seaman. You gone and you left Barbados, sir, and you worked the sea for years. But those days are done. And Barbados has to build out the capacity to generate the kind of seafarers, sir, that would allow us, sir, to reach these opportunities. The minister spoke of the training that we are doing, sir. There's a STCW course, it's called the Standard of Training Certification of Watchkeeping. It's perhaps the most important thing for people who want to work the sea. And we found, sir, that in Barbados, we couldn't offer the training. I mean, you could offer the training, but you could not offer the certification. We started it, sir, when I was there. The minister has continued it, and built on it, sir, and made it a lot more bountiful, sir. But Barbados still has to put itself right now in a position, sir, where we still have to go to another country to be certified. And until we pass the legislation, this and the immersion suite of legislation, sir, we cannot certify Barbadian seafarers. And this legislation, sir, in conjunction with the larger piece of legislation, the immersion suite, in conjunction with the seafarers legislation, says to the world that Barbados is a serious space. But that STCW training that the minister spoke of, that will be done at the Polytechnic, SJPI, and also now at BIMAP, sir, would allow us to train up a number of persons. I also feel, sir, in this new space where I sit, and I've communicated this, that a number of these positions, I hope, would go to a number of the people who are the most vulnerable. So that we have to have a deliberate policy of hiring, almost like positive discrimination or affirmative action, so to speak. So that the people who are in my one family program, the 1,000 most vulnerable families, sir, can find opportunity on the sea. So that we start picking from these persons, sir, to break the cycle of poverty as the inevitable economic opportunity comes. Because with this kind of work that is being done in that space, sir, economic opportunity is inevitable. But I hope that we can benefit all of us, sir, from the economic opportunity that is to come, sir. I would also want to say, sir, that the most consultation, I think, sir, that was done in that space was done during the time I was there and during the time now that the minister is here. Sir, the persons who operate the smaller vessels will tell you that for a long time, they did not feel that they were an important part of seafaring, of shipping, and so on in Barbados. And that many people refused to have conversations with them, sir, on the issues, the day-to-day issues that affected their lives. The space, sir, that fed their children and their grandchildren. And way back, sir, in 2019, 2020, sir, these conversations started. And I know the minister continued with earnest, sir, when he took up the post, sir, to continue those conversations. We encouraged that space to form a group, to come together, I would say, at all the meetings, form a body, put some pressure on the government. You can't come and negotiate one, form a body. And they did, sir, I think it is called boats. I think it's called boats, sir, for the smaller vessels, sir, to be able to negotiate for themselves, to have those conversations with the mighty powerful port so that they could get treated well, sir. And I must say, sir, that in Barbados, sir, the port is perhaps the most generous public institution, sir, that even compared to the private sector that I've seen, sir, in relation to the work that they do to help smaller people in this country, the work that they're doing for the fish markets and so on. I must commend the port, sir, for being a very good partner to the average Barbadian. But we encourage them, sir, to form smaller bodies, to form a body, sir, that could negotiate on their behalf. And that this legislation, sir, was not written in the sky. It reflects the will, the interest, and the input of the persons, sir, who operate the smaller vessels. I remember during COVID, how difficult it was, sir, for a number of those smaller vessels, the operators. I remember the generosity of the port during that period to make sure that people could eat the food, sir. And as we build out and continue to build out, sir, it has to be that we do so in partnership. And that this legislation, sir, speaks to the kind of partnership, sir, that we have to have, sir, as we continue to build out Barbados, sir. You know, we speak a lot about climate change, sir, but it is a reality. We've seen it. We know what climate change is doing, sir. We know why we need to have mitigation and adaptation built in, sir. This bill does it. We know why we have to do it. Many people, sir, are watching their vessels, sir, being tossed and turned, sir, as the ocean becomes warmer, sir. As that space becomes even more difficult for people now to generate revenue, sir. More and more difficult, sir. We're dealing, I'm sure the Honourable Minister of Environment will speak to it, sir, but we're dealing with sargassum, seaweed, and the difficulty that it poses for them, sir. A sargassum floods the shore, and the vessels, sir, now have to navigate through that, sir. So this legislation, sir, also speaks to the smaller vessels, the jet ski operators. And again, I remember, sir, at one of those consultations, a jet ski operator, in his own honest evaluation of his own industry, while we were there, sir, and I want to commend the Marine Police because we were there with the Coast Guard, the Marine Police, the members of the port, the members of the then Ministry of Maritime. And that jet ski operator described the jet skis in the view of Barbadians as the ZRs of the sea. He said people see them as the ZRs of the sea, and that there was a need for them to conform themselves to some discipline and to present themselves on the ocean, sir, in a way that reflected not only the discipline, but reflected order. Some of them spoke, sir, because, sir, there's a way we judge people in Barbados, you know. You assume because a person doesn't wear a shirt and tie and a jacket in May, the hottest month of the year ever in Barbados. I look forward to the day when we don't have to be wearing these things. But you might think, sir, that because a person is bareback in shorts and riding a jet ski, sir, not you, but people, may assume that these men are not of advanced intelligence. The people who operate these vessels, sir, are of advanced intelligence. And certainly they are of advanced knowledge when it comes to the knowledge of the sea. And the reverse is also true. You may assume jacket and tie assumes or equates to intelligence. And we've come to realize, sir. Anyway. But Mr. Speaker, sir, at the end of the day, sir, when we started having those conversations with the jet ski operators, sir, these men started telling us about the need to go digital, being able to take payments on cell phones and different ways, sir, of making sure that they could generate revenue in a way that was orderly. You would assume that most of the jet ski operators do not want order. You may assume that most of the ZR operators do not want order. That would be untrue. Lie is unparliamentary. That would be untrue. Because most of the persons who operate in this space do want order. But there are always bad apples out there trying to spoil the whole bunch. Sir, you have ZR operators, sir, running around, driving through lanes, road, coming where we've been begging for some humps. The minister responsible for South Central and myself. Up and down the road, sir, like the road belonged to them. You see jet ski operators doing the same thing. I remember one day we left Cabinet, sir, in Bay Street, looking over the lovely Carlisle Bay in my constituency. And there was jet ski operators doing figure eights and coming close to the shore and trying to see who could generate the most water kick up. Recklessness right in front of the Parliament, sir. That is why this legislation, sir, is so important. We have to bring order, sir. And I'm saying to you that for the most part, the persons who operate the jet skis actually do want the order. And, you know, I take the point, sir, raised by the leader of the opposition, sir, in relation to finding a way to enforce, sir, but I'm saying that the first order of business must be voluntary compliance. And that a lot of that can be generated from conversation, maintenance, maintaining the partnership, having the jet skis regulate themselves. But where that fails, the legislation, sir, speaks to what the minister is able to do, sir. And therefore, sir, at the end of the day, sir, I look forward to the minister being able to do that work. Sir, at clause 305 in this bill speaks to the minister having the power to make regulations for, and it lists a number of things. The minister having the power, sir, to make regulations for from A to almost the entire alphabet, from A to Z. The entire alphabet, sir, at clause 305. The minister, sir, has the capacity to make these regulations, sir. And I must tell you that I've already seen in my time, and I'm sure it's been developed more in the minister's time, a number of the pieces of things that are to go into the regulations. We had already started, sir, putting those buoys, or buoys, people call them, on the sea, sir. We'd identified specific locations that would serve as lanes for the jet ski operators. Once they reach a certain distance from the shoreline, they have then to come in and out using these lanes. And these lanes, sir, would allow bathers to swim safely on shore and not come into these lanes. So you could see from the land, sir, whether the jet ski operator is within the lanes that we had established or not. And when these regulations pass, sir, you can make sure, sir, you can guarantee, as much as you can guarantee, but you can enforce whether when the jet skis get closer to shore, the small vessels, not only the jet skis, get closer to shore, whether they are within these spaces or not, sir. So it allows you to make to enforce the legislation, sir, in a way that makes sense, sir. Sir, also in the second schedule, sir, to this bill, on page, well, I shouldn't say the page, but in the second schedule to this bill, sir, there are a number of fees for breaches that are listed. This is an opportunity for the country, sir, to generate revenue, sir. It is also a good thing because the bill reflects the position of the government that we do not wish to criminalize people for things, sir, that are not necessarily criminal offenses in their nature. So we're issuing tickets, sir, the types of tickets, sir, from the maritime safety breach tickets, all listed, sir, in the second schedule, which would allow us also to generate revenue without criminalizing people. But of course, if you continue to mash the crease, eventually something gotta happen. So this bill, sir, is a bill, sir, that does not criminalize. It is a bill, sir, that is extensive in its nature. It is part of our wider architecture in relation to what we're doing in the merchant shipping space, sir, what we're doing for seafarers. It gives the level of certainty that is necessary, sir. I am happy that it is now fitted again within the Ministry of Tourism, sir, because it allows us to really reflect, sir. You took it out for a minute to fix it, put it back, sir, and build on it. Therefore, sir, as we go forward, sir, I believe that Barbados will be a lot better off for the work that is being done by the Minister for St. Michael West Central and his team, sir. And this bill, sir, did not just follow the air. There was an extensive policy brought to Cabinet, agreed upon at Cabinet, that informed this bill, sir. So yes, sir, this bill is a technical bill, sir, but this bill is also about real life. And I look forward to us being in a position, sir, to generate the economic activity, to hire the Barbadians to do these jobs. And the minister mentioned some of these jobs. I think they're going to be even more jobs than I or he or the minister could possibly imagine because of the work we're doing, sir. And I look forward to us building out the space and giving all of the necessary support to be able to do the things that we are supposed to do. So those few words, sir, I just wish to say that I support this bill fully. I think it is going to be transformative, sir. I think it is going to put Barbados on the map, sir. And I look forward to the day-to-day implementation, but the day-to-day results as a result of this bill. Those few words, sir, I thank you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that this Honourable House be adjourned to 2:15.
Suspended.
Sorry, that's suspended. I apologize. Suspended. Yeah, we suspended for lunch. Yeah. No, suspended for lunch.
Until?
2:15.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until 2:15 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. You think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 2:15 p.m.